My topic is changes in baseball. There have been many changes in baseball over the last few decades in the United States. Some of these are sociological, some are demographic, and others are to make the sport less boring and more attractive in the faster-paced society that we now live in. Some of the sociological changes that are influencing baseball involves both who are watching and who are playing. There has even been the added complexity of what the teams are called in Major League Baseball. We are looking at a team that got rid of its mascot, Chief Wahoo, a few years ago, and now the name change from the Cleveland Indians to the Cleveland Guardians has occurred. This is a name that the team held for about a century. This name change brought some attention to whether the Atlanta Braves should change their name as well, so that it did not disrespect indigenous American populations. There is no indication either from Major League Baseball or the Atlanta Braves that they intend to do so. The Atlanta team situation has been complicated by some commentators over the move of the team from a downtown location to a suburban location. It has been inferred that the downtown location had given the team a greater connection to the African American community, which has been claimed that they have lost at the new location. There has been some accusations that there are few African American players on the team. This is not incorrect, but it is not just associated with Atlanta. The demographics of Major League Baseball have changed significantly in the last couple of decades. The number of black players peaked at 18.7% in 1981, and by 2016 had decreased to 6.7%, a decrease of 2/3. Latino players, after being in the low teens percent for a long period of time, began to increase in the mid-1980s and peaking at 28.5% in 2009. In 2016, Latinos still comprised 27.4% or more than a quarter of all baseball players at the major league level. Interestingly, after falling to 60.3% in 2004, Caucasian, non-Hispanic populations have risen to 63.7% by 2016. What does this all mean? Well, we have to understand that the U.S. population in general, and the young population specifically, are in more and more urbanized locations. Most studies have indicated that much of the younger and poorer populations living in central city locations have been more attracted by basketball and football than baseball. In as short a time period as 10 years, Little League Baseball participation has been cut in half in many locations, and that was pre-pandemic. Therefore, it is obvious that baseball has challenges related to demographics. It also has structural challenges within the game. The problem is that baseball has a problem with things getting larger and longer. Games take longer and less happens on the field. Over the past 50 years, the average length of a baseball game has been increased from about 2.5 hours to 3 hours and 11 minutes. The number of balls in play, meanwhile, has become smaller. Hits are near historic lows, strikeouts at historic highs. In 1980, about 1 in 8 trips to the plate ended in a strikeout. It's now about this season the rate was twice that. This makes for long lulls in action. According to the league, the time between batted balls has reached an average of nearly 4 minutes, up by almost a minute from 20 years ago. It's a worrisome trend for a sport that's competing for attention with a society that reacts through social media and online reporting at a fast pace. Games are about 1/3 longer than they were in 1980. There were almost twice as many strikeouts now as in 1980. They are now more than twice as many home runs per game as there were in 1980. This has meant that there are fewer plays that involve fielders and base runners as the number of strikeouts, walks, and home runs increase. The statisticians that took over baseball's front offices over the past 25 years taught teams that they could improve their odds of victory by removing the randomness of action on the field and keeping games between hitters and pitchers as much as possible. According to this school of thought, the most desirable outcomes of an at-bat are a home run, a walk, or depending on whose side you're on, a strikeout. But smarter baseball turns out to be less fun, less exciting game of catch punctuated by the occasional run around the bases. Fielders stand around, base runners don't slide, they stroll. Major League Baseball has realized that fans find this less than exciting. Supposedly, its own surveys show that fans want to see triples and steals, both of which have become less and less common. It could be argued that baseball is trying to emulate what other pro sports leagues like the NBA and NFL had done. Rule changes were made to increase the productivity of the offenses, leading to more scoring, or at least a faster pace of the games. At least in those sports, this has led to more popularity. The history of Major League Baseball has been more of a conservative approach in the past, so that traditions could be protected. That has begun to change under Rob Manfred, who took over as its commissioner in 2015. In efforts to speed up gameplay and increase action, Manfred has limited mound visits and pitching changes and said he would consider banning infield players from shifting sides of the field. It is likely, though, that any major changes in the operating rules will require cooperation between baseball management and the players, especially the players' union. Baseball players, as well as baseball purists, will have to be convinced that these changes will benefit the players, the game, and be pleasing to the fans. Although baseball is not about to die and disappear, there are significant problems to address. Since the U.S. Supreme Court allowed sports betting beyond the Las Vegas and Atlantic City in 2007, increased revenues and interest, especially in fantasy leagues, is obvious. The American League wildcard game between the Yankees and Boston Red Sox on October 7th had 7.7 million viewers, the most for a Major League Baseball game on ESPN in 24 years. Besides these anecdotal indications of improvement, there remain negative signs as well. Average attendance has been falling since 2007. Average game attendance fell from 32,696 in 2007 to 28,199 in 2019, more than a 10% drop in 12 years. It appears that youth participation and interest has waned. Only 7% of Major League Baseball viewers were under the age of 18. Youth participation has flatlined. The average viewer in 2000 was 52 years of age. In 2016, it was 57. Attendance at Major League Baseball games dropped 11 million from 2007 to 2019. Average viewership of a World Series game dropped 44.2 million in 1978 to 9.8 million in 2020. Clearly, these kinds of shifts and changes can't continue if Major League Baseball is to remain viable in the future. Major League Baseball lacks the National Basketball Association attraction and global presence, and the National Football League's TV ratings and the attraction of the Super Bowl. If the league can't solve its strikeout problem and find ways to get more action back in the game, it risks sliding from past its prime to irrelevant. Baseball has been playing around with changes to the rules in some minor leagues to perhaps speed the games up and increase fan interest. The pitcher's rubber, where the pitcher stands, was moved back a foot. Batters have been allowed to try and steal first base. When a pitched ball gets by the catcher, bases have been increased in size, and in the minor league test markets from 15 by 15 to 18 by 18 inches, making the bases bigger and easier to reach. Additionally, strictly limiting visits to the mounds by coaches, and using an automated ball strike system, robot umpires to call pitches at the plate. The latter change has brought the most resistance. This is partly because what is listed in the rulebook as the dimensions of the strike zone is not necessarily how umpires have been calling balls and strikes for years. Adjustments have had to be made in how the robot umpires look at the strike zones. The strikes and balls are relayed to the umpires through a smartphone earbud type system. Many traditionalists oppose this system because it takes, in their view, the interaction between the umpire and the batter and the catcher and the pitcher out of the game. In their view, it sterilizes and dehumanizes the game. Perhaps they are right, but perhaps it is time for technology and progress to march on forward. Major League Baseball has already adopted some of its changes at the big league level. It's likely other changes are in the future, at least to experiment with. Despite the fact there are a number of ideas being experimented with, there is a list of suggested changes that have been rejected. These have included removing a defender from the field, making the ball bigger, making fastballs down the middle count for more than one strike. The fact of the matter is that it took some time for baseball to realize that it had a problem that needed to be fixed. One of the first signs was that the batting averages of batters was decreasing, but there did not seem to be an impetus for implemented change until the increasing length of games and its effect on fan interest were felt. Many who protest some of the changes that are being experimented with object to the removal of human error as with robot umpires. However, it seems that most agree, despite the resistance, that the game needs to adapt so it can survive in the faster-paced age that we live in today. This will require keeping the basic fundamentals of the game intact while allowing for changes that are just common sense. We also have to recognize that our society is going for changes, and what was once acceptable behavior is no longer, and that even sporting activities are subject to the new realities that we live in. My references: Baseball Demographics 1947 to 2016, written by Mark Moore and Daniel Levitt in 2017, Society for American Baseball Research. The next is Ira Bodway, published on October 11, 2021. MLB is testing ways to fix baseball's boredom problem, Bloomberg Business Week. This was written by Jairo Ramos, published on April 18, 2014. Baseball's Demographic Shift Brings Cultural Complexities by NPR. And next is Patrick Saunders, published on March 28, 2021. The State of Baseball, the Grand Old Game Needs Fresh Ideas, in the Denver Post. And by Jen Steer, published on July 24, 2021, The History of the Cleveland Indians Name, WTRF, Netstar Media. And that is my topic on the changes of baseball.